Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the ETVT podcast, where you're free to build your perception from an infinite world of possibilities. I'm your host, Elijah Vargas.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the ETVT podcast, where we're all about perception. So today's episode is going to be somewhat of an extension to one that I had previously done on gratitude, because in light of me taking all of my notes and doing all of my things, I actually elevator music. I actually wanted gratitude to also be mixed in with a book review. So since I messed that up completely, well, not completely, but since I messed up my original idea, I'm just going to have the book review and we're going to keep talking about gratitude, because here's the thing. At this time of recording, elections start tomorrow, at least where I am. And I'm currently on a fast. And it was originally scheduled for 7 to 7, but I start my day at 5:30, 6 o'clock-ish. So I'm pretty much going on to my 13 and a half hour. The fast is supposed to end within 10 minutes. The food that my girl cooks smells amazing, and we're disciplined over here, okay? But yeah, I took some time and I prayed. I went to my church after work and, just prayed for unity, just prayed for, you know, obviously God to look over people no matter what happens, and forgive those who may do wrong. Because let's be honest, when it comes down to politics and all these things, not to get super sidetracked, but corruption is a big thing. It's a big issue. It always has been since the beginning of time, since the beginning of recorded history. It's almost like a human natural thing. So there's a lot to pray about in that. But in light of that, instead of me talking about why one candidate may be better than the other, or one side is better than the other, I want to talk about gratitude. And for this book review, we're going to jump right in. It's Hope Lives Here by Angela S. Hatch. And I just want to say, I actually work with this young lady, and this was a surreal experience for me for a multitude of reasons. A being, this is the first book that I've read from a local author, and I am not disappointed in my experience at all. But there's something different when you are reading a book such as this one, and it's not like a New York Times fictional bestseller or a New York Times best-selling autobiography or something based off of these well-known theories and ideas or a very famous person. This is me diving into the mind and the heart and the experience of somebody that I've known for a few years now. And it's just a different experience. I think that I've said enough for you guys to understand that it's not the same. So I want to jump right into this. Hope Lives Here. The reason why this goes hand in hand with gratitude is because, without me giving any spoilers, here's the thing. Miss Angie is what we would call a believer, a religious woman, right? Frequent churchgoer. And I have learned that she has done missionaries in the past. And basically what this book is you can say something of a fictional account of real life events. Now, this isn't fictional in the terms of we're going to throw in some science fiction, a little bit of sci-fi. It is a complete real world scenario with fictional characters to protect their identity, to, not put things out there that shouldn't be out there. But in all seriousness, this is one of those books where there is not a single thing in here that you could read that has not happened to anybody before, that isn't happening to this day. So I'm going to read the back because I feel like the back perfectly describes it. And then we'll go into the nitty gritty juicy parts. In the remote hills of Guatemala, hope is not a familiar word. Rodrigo, Crystal, and Javier live in a one-room shanty with dirt floors, bamboo walls, and a rusty tin roof that leaks. At 12, Rodrigo dreams of going to school, but must work in the fields every day to help the family make a meager living. By striking a deal with his sick mama, I'm gonna stop trying. I'm just gonna pronounce it how we pronounce it where I live. Rodrigo goes to school, but when tragedy strikes the family, Rodrigo's dreams are suddenly shattered. Meanwhile, a mission team from the US travels to Guatemala to build houses. Next door to their shanty, Rodrigo, Crystal, and Javier watch as volunteers hammer every nail and cut each board, delivering hope to another family. First time missionary Mandy is obsessed with the buzz of corporate life, but in Guatemala, she encounters a peace she's never felt. Mandy notices the young onlookers and her world turns upside down. It's no longer about her doing a good deed. In fact, it's not about her at all. Find out how, despite their differences, they discover that with God, no matter where they are, hope lives here. So, just from that description, oh, wait, hold on. Bam. I'm going to use that for the thumbnail and make sure you can see the, yeah. Fun fact, actually, I'm sure she won't mind me sharing this, but these are actual pictures that she has taken on her trip. So and you'll actually see pictures throughout the book, but I'm not gonna share anything. I will post a link to the book on Amazon. Phenomenal. She has a series, and I am definitely gonna read the other book once I finish the next 5 books that I have scheduled ahead of that. Anyway, let's get into the juices. So here's the thing with this book is when it starts off with Rodrigo, you see him as this young, ambitious, hungry to learn. He knows that there's more beyond the world that's out there, which you guys hear me preach numerous times. There's plenty of that same type of speech all over social medias and in some of the great minds, philosophers and all this good stuff, scientists, actors, whatever. I remember reading like the first 2 or 3 chapters, and I was telling Angie how much I relate to Rodrigo. I'm like, man, he's ambitious for, knowledge. He's ambitious for success, him seeing beyond his family life. Like, I get it, bro. But then you get deeper into the book, and there are so many pieces to his experience that you kind of know about. We see on the news all the stories of unfortunate children and families and, certain parts of Africa, because we know that not all of Africa is like that. And if you don't know that, please educate yourself. Um, certain parts of different types of islands. You have political turmoil in Cuba and terrible things that happen there. All types of different types of civilizations in the Middle East. And I say that because when I was there, you have the really ritzy areas and beautiful, monarchs and cities with gold plated malls. But then there's a part that people don't necessarily talk about where it's the other towns. Like there is no middle class. You're either rich or you're extremely poor, and the poor there is very poor. It made me cry on numerous occasions. Um, we hear these stories, we see it on social media, but do we truly connect with what is actually happening to other people around the world? And this is where I also considered the importance of missionaries. Because around that time, my church played a video of a well that they had built for uh, people. I don't remember specifics, but in a certain part of Africa, and the children were so excited to have fresh water. And at the same time as I'm reading this book, it changed my life. It was a very important couple months for me because it really opened my eyes to not just how unfortunate people are in the Middle East, but the fact that this is a real world thing. There are children and families around the world who don't have the luxury of waking up and going to school every day, and have the opportunities to use the education to get a day job, to live in a beautiful place. Like it made me appreciate my apartment so much more. Like I don't care about the 500 to $1 million home that somebody has worked 30, 40 years of their life for and is paying off and indulges in, or the nice cars that they drive. I'm thankful for the fact that I have a wonderful, reliable, clean vehicle, that I have a wonderful home that has everything I need: hot water, cold water. I can cook anything I want when I want. My biggest concern is working my day job. And after thinking about how much I have to be grateful for, working a day job doesn't even really feel like a concern. I look at so many of our problems and I'm like, how silly are we to have such political turmoil? And no, let me not say political turmoil. I think America has a lot of reasons to have political turmoil right now. Separate conversation, but social turmoil, right? Like so many things that people get mad about in different cultures, whether it's LGBTQ or whether it's Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, this and that. And I'm like, you guys, we have such an opportunity to do so much as a unified country, but we continue to diversify ourselves and argue. I'm also going to throw in the KKK. Like, why? What is the reason for all of this? And it makes me look at it from less of a cultural perspective and more from an individual perspective, where we each as individuals have this opportunity to make reality this beautiful thing. I truly do believe that. And I think that people are stronger when they do things together. Absolutely. But that's why such negative things speak so loud, why the media has to be negative to sell, because that is the culture that we have built, right? So all this really ties into thoughts that I have accumulated when reading this book, because when you look at how easily, and I don't want to spoil it because as you can see, it is a smaller read, but it's very powerful. And don't be fooled by the fact that this isn't written by a New York Times bestselling author. Angie, kudos to you, because if you ever see this, I'm sure you may not, but kudos to her, because her being a person that has shared such an experience, there's a lot of power behind it. And I truly do believe that if she had a specific publisher or a specific person, like famous person, whatever, if this book ever got into the hands of somebody with a large following, I think people from around the world will definitely feel the power in this book. Let me take it out the light for a second. There we go. Um, so without too many specifics, right? And I feel like I have said a lot, and actually my fast is a minute over, but we're gonna keep going, all right? It's kind of like when you're at the gym and you fought hard for that last, 12, 15 reps. Sometimes if you're supersetting and you have that one more push where you're like, you push so hard to get here, but surprise yourself, shock the muscles. We're gonna shock the the body right now. Um, Here's the thing, you guys. Do not lose sight of the fact that I think there's a psychological aspect to be explained here when it comes down to our Western culture, especially in America. We have issues with our food regulation. We have issues with social media. We have social issues altogether. We have issues with certain products that are being used and carcinogens that are in the air and microplastic. There are things that we're figuring out that are serious issues. I'm not saying that we don't have serious issues, but we are not living in straw-made homes on mud floors. We have access to education. I can take this tool right now and learn everything about anything that I need to know to help my family have a better future. Great example. I was working on renewing my insurance policies today. I have read articles and articles on the difference between CHPA and PPO or PPT, whatever it's called. If I had any questions about any specific insurance company, whether it was Blue Cross Blue Shield or United, and different terms and what certain things mean, I can look that up. It's time consuming. It's hard, right? But that is such a power that we have access to that is it's a blessing. There's no other way to put it. It is a blessing to have access to books, to have access to libraries, to have access to internet, to have access to beautiful architecture and infrastructure. Now, is it becoming dull in America? Yes. I have seen a video where it was comparing like old architecture to new architecture, and you can kind of see how grayish and plain, like a lot of apartments and stuff look like just boxes, simple shapes and cubes and squares put together. And then, it's the same color. There's like a kind of a black and white and gray type of vibe that we're getting. I remember going to Chick-fil-A in one of my local cities, and the playground there looked like a prison. You had the black padding and the gray, like it was just black and gray. And actually, when I go back, I will have a video and I'll share it. But I've noticed that we are taking a very simple theme in our world today. And in some ways, to me, that most definitely is a problem. And I think that we should, bring life, bring color to things. We are losing sight of the importance of art and what it does for our mind and our spirit. And in a way, I do feel like it is an agenda. I do feel like it is a form of control by whatever you want to call it, the elites, the government, the there's a term like when you talk about Black Rock and the Rockefeller family and all this stuff, whatever you want to call it. I do believe it's for a purpose, and that there are definitely groups, maybe an accumulation of groups that do it intentionally to sell certain products, to program our minds to want to live certain ways, indulge certain things. Like it's a very real thing. Like I don't know if I did the book review on the Mozart effect, but what we put in our minds as far as sounds and waves, it's a very serious thing. Like the crackling of your heater or your fan could affect your brain in a certain way, and it's amazing. Just the Mozart effect. Read the book. Anyway, yes, we have all these issues that I just spent probably about 5 minutes discussing. But books like this make you realize that in the grand scheme of things, we're not entitled to how good we have it as human beings. For thousands and thousands of years, and now, but for thousands of years, the world as a whole had it worse. Like advanced technology was not a cell phone, was not video games, was not all these things that we can indulge in. Like I'm pretty sure at one point, kings and queens were the only ones who had access to instant hot water and meals that they wanted, and even spices. Like we are living 10 times, maybe even 100 times better than kings and queens did back in the day. And yet we're still so depressed and anxious and angry and bitter and unhealthy. And in my opinion, it is so easy for us now to be intelligent, open-minded, very wise and capable human beings than it has been in the years before. But we lose sight of that very easily when we get caught up in our bills, when we get caught up in our debts, when we get caught up in social policies and social norms. Like you go to school and you get bullied, you go to school and you feel like you don't fit in because you can't learn things the way that you think is the only way to learn, because that's how the public school system in America teaches you to learn. You feel like you don't fit in with everybody else because you don't necessarily fit into this culture, this agenda. And it's hard, it's difficult. But again, the things we have the things that we have to be grateful for, that we have to be grateful for, trumps all of that. And this book, it wakes you up to the true meaning of starvation, the true meaning of survival. And this is what I like about what Angie did, is she didn't just include and hyper focus on one spectrum of it. If you remember, when I read the back of the book, there's a character named Mandy who is obsessed with the buzz of corporate life. And this character, Mandy, is another perspective that's brought in there. So when I got done reading the book, I realized that I was not a Rodrigo or a Roddy. Never mind. I'm 13 hours in my fast. All right, leave me alone. I wasn't him. I was a Mandy. I was the corporate living, never feeling like everything in my life is difficult, until I finally understand what it's like to live like uh, a majority of the population in certain areas of this world. Not when I say this world, I don't mean America. It's very important that you remember that, because I'm learning that some people can't differentiate the two. how big this world actually is beyond what a lot of people actually talk about, because we get so comfortable in our own culture, in our own life. And, it amazes me how many people in my small hometown will talk about everywhere else in the world, but have never left anywhere, or the most they've traveled was to New York or to California or to Tennessee or to Miami. Like, you can read, you can go on social media, you can talk to people, but you have to actually have an open mind and experience it at least once in your life. Because I can tell you, I didn't. People's stories mean so much more to me after I actually got out there and experienced what those parts of the world is like for myself. And it's hard. It's depressing, especially like if you go as a soldier. And this is one of the difficult parts for me. Is it's like men don't cry. You are a robotic machine. You shouldn't worry about if children are being bombed or whatsoever. You shouldn't worry about if children are starving. You shouldn't worry about if this lady's begging you for money and her children sitting there dead in a tent. Like, why would you cry about any of that? Remorse or empathy or any of that. And that's why I spent a lot of my time in the church, is because I realized that I didn't match the hype that you get when you first become a soldier. There were certain things that once you experience it for yourself, you kind of, the saying that it is what you signed up for is never really the case, because I don't care who you are. Nobody knows what they signed up for until they get there. And some people may never even figure that out. But when you truly do see what war means around the world, it just opens up your mind and makes you realize how much you don't know, which in turn also makes you more grateful for the life you have. And I can sit here and preach this all day long, but I do feel like a lot of people are not going to understand it until they are just there. So reading this book meant so much more to me, because maybe I felt like I finally found someone that actually understood. And what's amazing is this is somebody who has gone and seen these places on missionaries, not as a soldier, but as a person trying to spread, the love of Christ, the forgiveness, the caring, the effort, like the selflessness. It's very hard to explain, which is why the Bible is such a phenomenal, complex book. And that's why I'm careful when I talk about it, because I don't ever know if the way I understand it or the way I portray it is as powerful as it can be, or as honest as it can be. It's hard to tell. And I'm also open to the idea that with the many versions and the things that have happened throughout history. Like, you have the Library of Versailles, or however you pronounce it, where there are many writings. And I think the Pope is only one that has access to it, but nobody is allowed to go. Like, it's blocked off, and if you go there, you'll be killed. And then everybody knows that there were periods with corruption of the Catholic Church, and I think they call it the Lutheran era, the Martin era, Martin Luther era, where there was so much corruption in the Catholic Church that there were many parts of the original Bible that has been burnt, because there were priests, uh, or maybe even popes as well, but high officials in the church that decided that if they don't like a part of the Bible, rip it and burn it. And I actually learned that in school. Shout out to Miss McKinney, who I have had on my podcast, one of the realest history teachers I've ever seen to this day. And I love you. Thank you so much. But anyway, all this that I'm speaking from my experience with this book, because you guys have no idea how much it meant to me to get to read this book after having all the experiences I had. And at the current moment, this book is the best description that I think a civilian can get of what it's like for a lot of the families out there. And in my opinion, this actually isn't even the worst. This book has death, this book has misfortune, but Angie does a great job at really building um, a connection with all the characters for somebody like me who's reading, but doesn't make you cry too much at the end. Like, you cry happy tears, so I will say it is something of a happy ending. It's almost like a there's more not versions, I'm sorry. She wrote more books for a reason, but this book didn't make me feel cruelities, if that's a word, the cruel nature of this world when I finished reading it. I was a mix of satisfied and not satisfied. So, she kind of ends the book with, great, you pretty sure this is what's going to happen, but you're not sure. So, I mean, Angie, phenomenal job. And thank you so much. I will say she gave this book to me for free. She handed it to me. And I told her after reading this, I'm going to pay for the next book of yours that I read because I have to support. I only feel right. So I will be posting a link to this book. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me. It's 7:14, election day tomorrow. I've had a long day at work. I'm so hungry right now. So almost 13 and a half hours in, I'm going to go chow down on my food. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I am going to record again throughout the week. Maybe it's the wooziness and the overwhelmingness of all the thoughts today, but yeah, this was a pop-up emergency podcast, you can tell it. So no matter what, ladies and gentlemen, remember that you should be grateful for being entitled to having your own opinion. You should be grateful for the freedom that we still have in America today. And no matter what, you should be grateful for the fact that there are still things that you can do, much more control that you have in your life that you may have, not paid attention to because of everything that's going on in social media and in the world and stuff now. But is it hard? Yes. Is it difficult? Yes. But you can and you will get through it. That is one of my favorite parts about this country is we may not get a lot of sleep, but in lieu of that, we can have access to taking care of our babies. We can have access to having a roof over our head. We can have access to 2 or 3 meals a day. And if we don't have access to 2 or 3 meals a day, because as my mom used to say when I was a kid, she knows how to stretch a dollar. We have the ability to stretch a dollar. Would you believe me if I told you that there are probably more people than not? Maybe. I haven't looked at any statistics, but after opening my eyes to how big the world is, I believe there's a chance that there are more people than not that don't even have the ability to stretch a dollar, that are hunting every day for their next meal, walking miles for semi-fresh water. Like, it is a very real thing. So I'm grateful for our country, no matter what happens tomorrow. And I only pray that the issues that we do have, we can unify ourselves and actually come up with viable solutions. Because I think that's another frustration in America today is we see things like with the environment, within our political stature and all these things. We see these things and people know, like we feel obviously, because we're not dumb. We know that there are things that we can do to fix it, but we grow frustrated when they're not. And I said I'm gonna leave a few minutes ago, but one more thing I want to share is look it up. There is supposedly there was an experiment that was ran with ants in a jar, and they had red ants and black ants. And the saying goes the ants were living perfectly fine in the jar, like they had their colonies and stuff like that. But it wasn't until you shook the jar that the ants started to panic. And then they started attacking each other. And the whole moral of that is the ants chose to attack each other because the jar was shook by an outside entity. None of them shook the jar, but they took it out on each other. And that's the simplest way to put it. There was also another study that I know was a real one with monkeys and bananas. I know all the experience on monkeys and chimpanzees. I think it has something to do with how their brains are compared to ours. But anyway, last story, and I promise I'm going. And I don't remember what book I read about this in. Actually, I spoke about it on a previous podcast when I was doing a huge book, like my first book review, and I used to do it in a collection of books. But anyway, camera's dead. Hold on 1 second. We'll be right back after this commercial break. All right, and we're back. I'm gonna have to come up with a theme or something. Told you guys I wasn't prepared for this podcast. Emergency pop up. But anyway, how it went is they trained the first group of monkeys to not climb to get the bananas. So they would have bananas up top, and when the monkeys would climb to get it, they would spray them with a water hose. And they did this so many times, and then they put the next group of monkeys in. And anyway, after so many groups, I don't remember if it was the second, third, or fourth, but eventually they decided to pull the water hose away, and it was like, we're not doing this anymore. But what would happen is when a new group of monkeys would come in and go to get the bananas, despite the fact that they would have been able to get the bananas, the other monkeys who had been trained with the water hose have realized that getting the bananas is bad, and they would beat the crap out of the monkeys that were trying to get it, unaware that at this point the bananas were free game. So, all those studies that explain things about how an outside force can cause, you know, the word starts with a C, cognitive creatures to, or cognitive, that's not the word I wanted to use, but I believe that I'm using the fast as an excuse. My brain's not operating anymore. I did a lot of reading today, but I will say cognitively functioning creatures at the moment. And I guess I could feel stupid later if I disprove myself. But it just shows that it's within nature for people and living things to grow an inner fear and hatred from effects from an outside entity that they don't even know exists. And I think basic ideas like that, whether it's psychological or sociological, we're humans and we're smart, but we're not perfect. And I think the biggest mistake that we've made was to think that we're perfect, to think that our opinions are perfect, to think that we know everything, to think that because we got an A in our classes or summa cum laude, that we are, above normal creatures with this crazy cognitive ability. And no, I sometimes I feel like we're pathetic because I recognize that we try to act like we're different, but we're all the same. And I sit in a lot of areas, like places that I'm in, and when I'm sitting in on meetings or something, I'm kind of like, I just think about how we act so many ways for no reason. We diversify ourselves, we put a status on ourselves, and I think people could work better together if we somehow squash that. And obviously we won't, because on the flip side, some type of hierarchy is important for control. Because as humans, we are also very nasty creatures. And we know that if we gave this whole country, freedom, the purge will happen because not everybody is in a good place. So, I mean, it goes deeper than that, but whatever. You guys get the point. So, ladies and gentlemen, Hope Lives Here by Angie Hatch. Uh, this whole conversation was based off of ways that this book has made me feel, things that we thought about from this book. And I just want to make sure that you don't forget, before I talked about those two experiments, be grateful for the world that you have, for the life that you're living in. And yeah, that's that, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to eat. So enjoy your nights, enjoy your mornings. Good luck, everybody. ETVT out.